I remember the sound. That's what haunts me most after all these years. Not the screaming, not the twisted metal, not even the sight of those massive steel beasts plunging into the dark water below. It's the sound. A deep, groaning crack that seemed to come from the earth itself, like the bones of some ancient creature finally giving way. I was 23 years old, standing on the western approach of the Ludendorff Bridge at Rhine, Germany, and I had maybe 15 seconds to live. I didn't know it then. None of us did. We were too focused on the impossible mission ahead, too drunk on the wild hope that we might actually pull this off, to notice the hairline fractures spreading like spiderwebs through the concrete beneath our feet. The date was March 7th, 1945. The war in Europe was stumbling toward its brutal conclusion, but nobody had told that to the Wehrmacht defenders on the eastern bank of the Rhine. They were dug in, determined, and they had orders to blow every bridge from Switzerland to the North Sea rather than let us cross. Intelligence said all the bridges were already gone, blown sky high by German engineers as our forces approached, but intelligence was wrong. Standing there in the cold March afternoon, with the Rhine churning gray and swollen below us, we could see it. The Ludendorff Bridge, still standing, still intact. The only bridge across the Rhine for 200 miles in either direction. I was a combat engineer with the 9th Armored Division, Sergeant First Class Michael Chen, though most of the boys just called me Lucky. The nickname started as a joke after I walked away from a direct mortar hit that killed 2 men standing right next to me outside. After today, I'm not sure if that name was a blessing or a curse. Lucky implies some kind of cosmic protection, doesn't it? But what I saw on that bridge, luck doesn't begin to describe it. Random chance, maybe. The arbitrary cruelty of physics and timing. But not luck? Never luck. We'd been advancing hard for 3 days straight, racing the Germans to the Rhine, expecting to find nothing but rubble and cold water when we got there. The plan was to stop, regroup, bring up pontoon bridging equipment, and mount a careful, calculated crossing sometime in April. But then came the radio call that changed everything. Bridge still standing at Repeat, bridge still standing. I remember Lieutenant Burrows dropping his coffee cup when he heard it. The hot liquid splashed across the map table, bleeding the blue Rhine into a brown stain. Nobody moved to wipe it up. We just stared at each other, understanding immediately what this meant. If we could take that bridge, capture it before the Germans blew it, we could pour troops and armor across the Rhine weeks ahead of schedule. We could cut into the heart of Germany before they had time to establish new defensive lines. We could end this war. The only problem was actually taking it. The bridge was still in German hands, rigged with demolition charges, and covered by machine gun nests, anti-aircraft guns repurposed as anti-personnel weapons, and God knows what else. Command didn't care. Get across that bridge, they said, whatever it takes. So we moved out, infantry riding on the backs of our Pershing tanks, racing down the hillside toward the river. I was in the 3rd tank, holding on to the turret with one hand and my carbine with the other, watching the bridge grow larger as we approached. It was beautiful in its way. That bridge, a massive black railway bridge, all riveted steel and stone towers, looking like something out of an older, more permanent age. The Germans had built it during World War I, and it had stood for nearly 30 years. It looked like it could stand for 30 more. The 1st infantry squads hit the western approach at a dead run. Small arms fire crackled from the far side, and I saw men go down, but others kept going, diving behind Rubel and returning fire. Our tanks opened up with their machine guns, raking the eastern towers. Then came the big guns, the 76mm main cannons booming, sending high explosive rounds into the German positions. The noise was enormous, overwhelming, the kind of sustained thunder that makes your teeth hurt and your vision blur. I jumped off the tank as it reached the bridge approach, taking cover behind a shot-up German half. The smell hit me then. Cordite, burning rubber, and underneath it all the wet mineral smell of the river. The Rhine was in flood, running high and fast with spring snowmelt from the Alps. The water looked black in the afternoon light. Thick and dangerous Lieutenant Burrows was suddenly beside me, his face streaked with dirt and sweat despite the cold. Engineers up. He shouted over the gunfire. We need to check those demo charges. If they blow this bridge while we're on it, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I gathered my team, 6 good men who'd been with me since Normandy. We'd cleared mines together, blown obstacles, built Bailey bridges under fire. This was just another job, except it wasn't. Demolition charges on a bridge this size would be massive. Military-grade TNT or dynamite, probably hundreds of pounds of it, wired to blow in command. If those charges went off, everyone on the bridge would die. Not might die, would die. The blast would tear the structure apart and send tons of steel and concrete and human beings plunging into that fast. Cold water below, we moved on to the bridge itself, staying low, working our way past infantry who were pushing toward the eastern bank. The bridge deck was railway track, sleepers in ballast, making for treacherous footing. Every few yards there were craters from near misses, twisted rails sticking up like broken fingers. I could see the demo charges now wrapped around the main support gird. Thick bundles of explosives connected by yellow wire that ran back toward the eastern bank. Someone on the German side had the detonator. All they had to do was push the plunger and this entire bridge would cease to exist. I started cutting wires, working carefully, despite my shaking hands. Cut the wrong wire and you might complete the circuit instead of breaking it. My boys spread out, doing the same. Wire cutters clicking in the brief pauses between machine gun bursts. That's when I saw the tanks coming. Our tanks. Pershing's massive 40-ton beasts starting to roll onto the bridge deck. I felt the structure shudder under their weight. Each tank was heavier than anything this bridge had carried in years, maybe ever. The Ludendorff was built for railway traffic, relatively light loads distributed evenly. These tanks were concentrated masses of steel, all that weight focused on narrow treads. The bridge groaned. I actually heard it groan, a deep metallic sound that I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. I looked up at Lieutenant Burrows. He'd heard it too. His eyes were wide, questioning. Should we stop the tanks? Should we wave them back? But stopping meant delay. Delay meant giving the Germans time to regroup, time to bring up reinforcements, time to find whatever was wrong with their detonator and fix it. Command wanted tanks on the eastern bank now, wanted to exploit this miracle before it disappeared. So the tanks kept coming. 1, 2, 3. For massive Pershings, tread screeching on the rails. Engines roaring. Heading toward the eastern bank where infantry was already engaging German defenders at close range. I went back to cutting wires, trying not to think about the vibrations I could feel through the bridge deck. The way the whole structure seemed to sway slightly with each passing tank, we were winning. I could feel it. German resistance was collapsing. Their machine gunners silenced or retreating. Their positions being overrun by our infantry. A few more minutes and the eastern bank would be secure. The bridge would be ours. Engineers could do a proper survey, shore up any weak points, and then we could start pouring an entire army across the Rhine. I allowed myself a moment of hope, a crazy thought that maybe we really had gotten lucky, that maybe this war really would be over soon. That's when I heard the first crack, not gunfire. Something deeper, more fundamental. A crack like a tree trunk splitting. I froze, wire cutters in hand, trying to locate the source of the sound. It came again louder this time, and I felt the bridge deck shift under my feet. Not much, just a few inches, but enough to make my stomach drop. Off the bridge. Someone was screaming, "Get off the bridge!" But there was nowhere to go. We were in the middle of the span, 200 feet above fast water, with tanks ahead of us and behind us. The infantry on the eastern bank was fighting hand-to-hand with German defenders. We couldn't go back, and we couldn't go forward. The 5th Pershing was halfway across when it happened. The main support girder on the southern side failed. I saw it clearly, saw the rivets pop like gunshots, saw the steel beam twist and buckle, saw the entire southern half of the bridge deck drop 3 feet in an instant. The Pershing slewed sideways, its right tread suddenly lower than its left, the 40-ton tank tilting at an impossible angle. The driver tried to gun the engine and power through, but the deck was buckling now, concrete and steel folding like paper. The tank tipped further, teetering on the edge of the twisted bridge deck. Time seemed to slow. I could see the tank commander in the turret hatch. I could see his face. Could see him realize what was about to happen. Then the tank went over. It rolled slowly at first, almost gracefully, then faster, tumbling off the side of the bridge and plunging toward the water below. I heard the splash, enormous and final, saw the spray shoot 50 feet into the air. The tank disappeared, just gone, swallowed by the Rhine in seconds. 5 men inside. 5 men who'd survived France and Belgium and Germany only to drown in a steel coffin in the middle of a river. The bridge was still collapsing. The failure was spreading, cascading along the southern support structure. Steel screamed and concrete crumbled. I felt the deck beneath me begin to tilt, and I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, heading for the eastern bank because it was closer than going back. Behind me, I heard another crash, another tank going over, or maybe part of the bridge itself. I didn't turn to look. I just ran. My boot slipped on the rails. I went down hard on my knee, felt something tear, didn't care, got up, and kept running. Men were screaming. The entire world was screaming. Actually, the sound of the collapsing bridge mixing with gunfire and shouts, and the roar of the river below, reached the eastern tower just as the main span started to go. I dove through the tower entrance and slammed into the far wall as the entire center section of the bridge tore free and dropped. The sound was indescribable, like the end of the world, like God himself tearing the earth in half. Dust and debris filled the air. Something hit my helmet hard enough to dent it. I covered my head with my arms and pressed against the stone wall and waited to die. This was it. The tower would go next, would tumble into the river, and I would fall with it, would join those tankers in the cold and the dark. But the tower held. Somehow, impossibly, the tower held. The thunder gradually subsided. The screaming continued, but quieter now, more distant. I opened my eyes and found myself staring at Lieutenant Burrows. He'd made it to... We were both covered in dust, bleeding from a dozen small cuts, but alive. We staggered outside and looked back at the bridge, or what was left of it. The center span was gone, dropped into the Rhine. The northern section was still partially intact, tilting crazily but not completely collapsed. The western approach was still standing. Somehow, impossibly, miraculously, part of the bridge remained. And we were on the eastern bank. We'd made it across. Not the way we'd planned, not the way anyone would have wanted, but we were across. The fighting around us had stopped. Germans and Americans alike were standing and staring at the ruined bridge, too shocked to continue shooting at each other. I saw German soldiers with their hands up, not because we defeated them, but because they'd just witnessed something that transcended the war. We'd all just watched men die, watched tons of steel and concrete fall, watched the impossible happen. In that moment, nationality didn't matter. We were all just human beings, stunned by the arbitrary cruelty of physics and chance. More of our troops were coming up behind us. Infantry who'd been on the northern section when it partially collapsed but had managed to scramble to safety. Engineers were already working, figuring out how to stabilize what remained of the bridge, how to get more troops across. Someone said they were bringing up pontoon equipment, that we'd have temporary bridges in place by nightfall. But I wasn't listening. I was thinking about that tank commander's face in the moment before his Pershing went over. I was thinking about 5 men drowning in darkness while I stood here breathing. I was thinking about the sound of that first crack, and how I'd had maybe 15 seconds warning, and how I'd used those seconds to run while others hadn't been so fortunate. The bridge at Remagen became famous. What was left of it, anyway? We held the eastern bridgehead, expanded it, and within days had several divisions across the Rhine. Historians say it shortened the war by months, saved thousands of lives. The bridge itself stood for 10 more days before the damaged structure finally gave out completely and collapsed into the river. But by then it didn't matter. We were across. The war was essentially over. They gave me a medal, Bronze Star, for my actions in clearing demolition charges under fire. They didn't mention that I'd failed to clear them all, that some charges had remained active, that the bridge had been more fragile than anyone realized. They didn't mention the 5 men in that Pershing, or the others who'd been on the center span when it went down. They called me a hero, called me lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt like a man who'd been standing in the wrong place at exactly the right time, or maybe the right place at exactly the wrong time, depending on how you looked at it. I came home in 1946, got married, had kids, worked as a civil engineer, building bridges in California. Good bridges, safe bridges, bridges that wouldn't collapse under the weight they were designed to carry. I never talked much about Remagen. What was there to say? That I'd survived by mere luck. That 15 seconds and 50 feet had been the difference between going home and drowning in the Rhine. That I could still hear that first crack in my dreams. Still felt the bridge deck shift under my feet. Still saw that tank commander's face. The war taught me many things, but Remagen taught me the most important lesson. There's no grand design, no cosmic plan that protects the worthy and punishes the wicked. There's just physics and chance and the arbitrary intersection of bodies and forces in time and space. I survived because I ran fast and turned right instead of left, and the tower I reached was built strong enough to withstand the collapse. 5 other men died because they were in a tank instead of on foot, because their driver chose to advance instead of retreat, because 40 tons of steel is heavier than human flesh and bone. I'm 98 years old now. Most of the men I served with are gone. The bridge itself is long gone, replaced by a modern structure that carries cars instead of trains. There's a museum in Remagen, a memorial to what happened there. I visited once in the 1990s, stood on the bank and looked at the towers that still remain. Someone asked me what I remembered most. I told them about the sound, that deep, groaning crack, the sound of something that seemed permanent and solid, revealing itself to be temporary and fragile, the sound of the moment before everything changes, the sound of luck running out for some and holding for others, and no way to predict which you'll be until it's over and you're either standing on solid ground or falling through empty air. I saw a bridge collapse under tanks and survived by mere luck. That's the simple version. The true version is more complicated. I survived by physics and timing and the choices of people I never met who built those towers strong. I survived because someone else died, because the universe needed to balance some equation I don't understand and never will. I survived to carry the memory of that sound, that crack, that moment when the world split open and showed me the truth about fortune and fate. I survived to build better bridges, stronger bridges, bridges that won't betray the trust we place in them. I survived to tell this story for whatever it's worth, and so me days in the quiet moments before sleep. I wonder if survival was the blessing or the burden. If lucky was the right nickname after all. If there's any meaning to be found in a random calculus that determines who lives and who dies on a cold March day on a failing bridge over a dark river, the answer, I think, is that there is no answer. There's just the sound of cracking steel, the sight of a falling tank, the feeling of stone under my hands as I pressed against that tower and waited to see if I would live or die. There's just the memory, sharp and clear after all these years, of the moment I learned that we're all standing on bridges we don't fully understand, carrying loads they weren't designed to bear, trusting in structures that might fail at any moment for reasons we'll never see coming. And all we can do is move forward, step by step, hoping the bridge holds just a little longer. Hoping our luck lasts just one more day, knowing that someday, for all of us, it won't. But not today. Not yet. Not while I'm still here to remember the ones who weren't as fortunate, who didn't get to walk off that bridge, who disappeared into dark water while I ran toward light and life. That's what I remember. That's what I carry. That's what I saw. I saw a bridge collapse under tanks, and I survived by mere luck. And I've spent 79 years trying to understand what that means, and I still don't have an answer. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe that's the point.